5:58 a.m., and an apartment complex's surveillance system captures 20-year-old Jimmie J. Lee leaving his apartment in just a sleeping gown and cap and a pair of slippers. Although it didn't appear he intended to be gone for very long, Jay would never return home. Police would uncover these messages sent between Jay and a secret lover shortly before he was seen leaving his apartment. Jay seemed hesitant to meet with this unknown lover, but when Jay required a physical act to be performed in a show of good faith, the mystery man replied,
July 8, 2022. Stephanie Lee called the Oxford Police Department 100 times that day because her son wouldn't answer his phone, and it was her birthday, which meant he should have called by now, which meant something was very, very wrong. His car turned up in a parking lot at the Molly Bar Trails apartment complex, but he wasn't in it. His apartment was empty, the door still locked from the outside. His last text message had been sent at 6:03 a.m., somewhere near a friend's place, and after that his phone went silent in a way that felt permanent. For nearly 3 years, his family searched while his name echoed across Oxford, Mississippi, across true crime forums, across vigils that refused to let him disappear twice. Then on a cold morning in February 2025, 2 deer hunters stumbled across bones scattered through the woods in Carroll County, pale and half buried in the dirt. And lying among them was a single piece of jewelry that had somehow survived everything else. A gold necklace. Cursive letters still legible after all that time. Jay Lee, the same necklace he wore in every photo, the one his mother could recognize from across a room, the one that had been with him the night he walked into someone's apartment and never walked back out. This is the story of Jimmie J. Lee, a 20-year-old who refused to hide who he was in a place where that choice made him a target, and the man who killed him, not because Jay ever threatened to expose him, but because he couldn't stand the idea of being seen. By the time you reach the end of this, you're going to ask yourself something most people don't want to think about. How many people noticed the warning signs before it was too late, and how many of them chose to look the other way? Welcome to True Crime Footprint, where we unveil the darkest mysteries and the most terrifying true crime tales. Kindly hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our new stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Jimmie J. Lee wasn't the kind of person you could ignore, and that was by design. He was a 20-year-old graduate student at the University of Mississippi, a Jackson native who had come to Oxford not just to study, but to live out loud in a way that felt impossible back home. He performed drag under the name J Diva, organized community supply drives, and built a presence on Instagram that was equal parts confidence and vulnerability. The kind of account where you could see someone figuring out who they were in real time and refusing to apologize for any of it. His family loved him without conditions, which is rarer than it should be. His father, Jimmie Lee Sr., is a pastor, the kind of man whose faith taught him to love his son exactly as he was. And his mother, Stephanie, checked in on him daily because that's what parents do when they know their child is navigating a world that doesn't always make space for people like him. Jay wore a gold necklace in almost every photo he posted, cursive letters spelling out Jay Lee. And if you scrolled through his feed, you'd see it glinting in selfies taken at his graduation, at parties, at moments that mattered enough to document. That necklace wasn't just jewelry, it was a marker of identity, a small act of defiance in a state where being visibly queer still carries weight. But there was someone else in Jay's life, someone who couldn't afford to be visible the way Jay was. Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. was 22 years old, an Ole Miss graduate from Grenada, Mississippi, about 90 minutes south of Oxford. He ran his own moving company, T&T Moving Co., the kind of small business that suggested ambition and discipline. His grandfather had founded the Abundant Life Ascendant Church back in Grenada, which meant Sheldon grew up in a world where reputation wasn't just important, it was everything. He and Jay had been involved in a secret relationship, the kind that existed only in private messages and late-night visits, the kind where one person gets to live authentically while the other has to calculate every risk. Sheldon wasn't out, couldn't be out, and whether that was fear or shame or something deeper doesn't really matter, because the result was the same. Jay's openness collided with Sheldon's need for concealment, and that collision turned fatal. On the night of July 8th, 2022, Jay texted Sheldon and made plans to come over. At 5:47 a.m., minutes before Jay arrived, Sheldon opened Google on his phone and typed in a search query that would later become the single most damaging piece of evidence against him. How long does it take to strangle someone? Some reports suggest he also searched details about the Gabby Petito case, another young person killed by strangulation, another life erased by someone who claimed to care about them. 13 minutes later, Jay's car pulled into the parking lot at Molly Bar Trails. He knocked on that door, Sheldon opened it, and by 6:03 a.m., Jay's phone sent its last message before going completely silent, and so did he. Have you ever been around someone who seemed completely normal until one day you realized they weren't? Like there was something underneath the surface you missed because you weren't looking hard enough, or maybe because you didn't want to see it. What was the moment you figured it out, and what did you do about it? Drop your answer below because I think most of us have been there at least once. If you believe people like Jay deserve to be remembered, and people like Sheldon don't get to erase them, hit that subscribe button right now, because staying silent is exactly what Sheldon was counting on. And the only way stories like this keep getting told is if you make the choice not to look away.
New information in the case of University of Mississippi student Jimmie J. Lee, who disappeared more than 2 years ago. A court in Lafayette County says Lee is now presumed dead as he, quote, underwent a catastrophic event that exposed him to imminent danger, which is expected to result in the loss of life.
Let's walk through what happened that morning, step by step, because the timeline is what buried Sheldon in the end. 5:47 a.m. Sheldon Harrington Jr. is awake, alone in his apartment, and he opens his phone to search for something most people would never think to look up unless they were already planning to use it. 6 a.m., surveillance cameras at the Molly Bar Trails apartment complex catch Jay Lee's car pulling into the parking lot, and you can see him get out, walk toward the building, disappear inside like he's done this 100 times before. 6:03 a.m., the last text message is sent from Jay's phone, geolocation data placing it near Sheldon's apartment, and after that, the phone stops pinging towers, stops sending signals, stops doing anything that would suggest the person holding it is still capable of making choices. By 10:45 a.m., Sheldon is already in motion. He's spotted on surveillance jogging away from the parking lot where Jay's car is now sitting abandoned. And he doesn't look panicked or sloppy. He looks like someone following a plan. He drives south to his parents' house in Grenada, which is about 90 minutes away, and security footage captures him loading a wheelbarrow and a long-handled shovel into the back of his work truck, the white box truck with T&T Moving Co. painted on the side. He doesn't go far after that, just another 35 minutes south into Carroll County, a stretch of rural Mississippi where the woods are thick enough to hide things for years if you know where to put them. He found a spot, dug deep enough to matter, and buried Jay Lee in a place he thought no one would ever look. Then he drove back to Oxford, back to his apartment, back to his life. And for 2 weeks, he acted like nothing had happened because maybe if he pretended hard enough, it would stop being real. But here's the thing about covering up a murder in 2022. Your phone remembers everything, even when you don't. Investigators pulled Sheldon's Google search history, his Snapchat messages, his iCloud data, his location records, and every single piece of digital evidence pointed back to the same conclusion. He had searched for how to kill someone. Jay had shown up minutes later, and Jay had never left. 2 weeks after Jay disappeared, Oxford police arrested Sheldon and charged him with capital murder. For 2 weeks, he thought he'd gotten away with it, and then the cops showed up at his door. Do you think he felt anything when he was burying Jay out there in the woods? Or do people like this just shut off that part of themselves so they can keep moving forward? I'm genuinely curious what you think happens inside someone's head when they cross that line. So tell me in the comments. And real quick, if you're still not subscribed, I need you to do something for me. Go down to the comments and tell me why. Like actually explain what's stopping you because I'm reading every single reply and I want to understand whether it's the algorithm or you just don't trust YouTube recommendations or something else entirely. 2 weeks after Jay disappeared, Sheldon was sitting in a jail cell facing a capital murder charge, which in Mississippi means the state believed he killed Jay while committing another felony, in this case, kidnapping. But there was a problem, and it was the kind of problem that has derailed cases before. No body. You can't prove someone is dead without proof they're dead, and Mississippi law required a workaround. The state invoked something called the Zeb Hughes Law, which allows someone to be declared legally dead after 2 years if the evidence strongly suggests they disappeared under circumstances that would make survival impossible. So the case sat, and Jay's family waited, and his friends kept organizing vigils, and the Justice for Jay Lee movement refused to let his name fade, even as months turned into years. In October 2024, nearly 2.5 years after he vanished, Jimmie J. Lee was declared legally dead by the state of Mississippi, and the trial could finally move forward. December 2024. The courtroom in Lafayette County was packed when the trial began, and prosecutors laid out their case piece by piece: the Google search at 5:47 a.m., the Snapchat messages between Jay and Sheldon, the surveillance footage showing Jay's car at the apartment complex, the cell tower data that tracked both phones until Jay's went silent, the video of Sheldon loading a shovel into his truck hours later. Every piece of evidence pointed in the same direction, and after days of testimony, the jury was sent to deliberate. They spent more than 9 hours going over everything, and when they came back, the vote was 11-1. 11 jurors said guilty. 1 juror said no. The reason? They couldn't convict without seeing the body, couldn't cross that line without physical proof that Jay Lee was actually dead. And so the case hung, and the judge declared a mistrial, and Sheldon went back to his cell, while Jay's family walked out of that courtroom with nothing. It felt like the system had failed, like all the evidence in the world didn't matter if you couldn't produce a corpse, and for a while it seemed like maybe Sheldon had won after all. But then something happened that changed everything. February 1st, 2025. 2 deer hunters were walking through a stretch of woods in Carroll County, the same rural area Sheldon had driven to with his shovel and wheelbarrow nearly 3 years earlier. And they found bones scattered across the ground, pale and weathered and unmistakably human. Lying among the remains was a gold necklace, cursive letters still readable after all that time. Jay Lee. If you were on that jury, could you have voted to convict without a body? Or would you have been the one who said no because the doubt was too strong? Be honest, because there's no right answer here. Just different ways of seeing the same question. If this story's hitting you the way it's hitting me right now, do me a favor and hit that like button, then share this video with someone who needs to see it, because cases like this don't go viral by accident. They go viral because people like you decide they matter enough to spread.
The remains of Jimmie J. Lee have been found nearly 3 years since the University of Mississippi graduate student went missing from his apartment back in 2022. The Oxford Police Department confirms the remains were found over the weekend by hunters in Carroll County were indeed a match for Lee. Now, this after being sent to the state crime lab for DNA testing. The court declared Lee dead just this past November, and in December, there was a mistrial in the murder case against Sheldon Timothy Harrington. He's accused of killing Lee to hide an alleged romantic relationship.
The hunters weren't looking for a body when they found one. They were just walking through the woods in Carroll County on a cold February morning, probably talking about the season or where the deer had been moving lately. And then they saw something that didn't belong. Bones, human bones, scattered and half buried in the dirt. And next to them, somehow still intact after nearly 3 years of rain and heat and animals in decay, was a gold necklace with cursive letters that spelled out Jay Lee. The same necklace Jay wore in every Instagram photo. The same one his mother could have identified from across a room. The one piece of him that survived everything else. On February 5th, 2025, the Mississippi State Crime Lab confirmed what everyone already knew. The DNA matched. The remains were Jimmie J. Lee, and the case that had been stuck in legal limbo for years could finally move forward. But here's the thing about waiting 3 years to find a body. The decomposition was so complete that the state medical examiner couldn't determine cause of death, couldn't say for certain whether Jay had been strangled or struck or killed some other way, couldn't give prosecutors the forensic smoking gun they would have needed to prove exactly how Sheldon had done it. Sheldon's plan had worked, at least partially, because by hiding the body long enough, he destroyed the evidence that could have sent him away for life. But he couldn't destroy the necklace, and the necklace was enough. The district attorney filed new charges, the retrial was scheduled, and on December 1st, 2025, jury selection was set to begin. That morning, before a single juror was seated, Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. stood up and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. No more trials, no more juries, no more pretending he hadn't done exactly what everyone knew he had done. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in the Mississippi Department of Corrections, 30 years for the murder, and 10 years for tampering with evidence, to be served consecutively with no chance of parole until he'd done his time. But even then, standing in that courtroom with his family behind him and Jay's family across the aisle, Sheldon never explained why he did it, never apologized, never offered anything resembling remorse. He just stood there. Why do you think he did it? Was it fear of being exposed? Shame about who he really was? A need to control someone he couldn't control any other way? Or something darker that we'll never fully understand? Drop your theory below because I want to know what you think was actually going through his head that night. If you stand against people like Sheldon, people who take lives and feel nothing and think they can just erase someone because it's convenient, then hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell because I'm not done telling these stories. And people like Jay don't get to be forgotten just because someone wanted them gone. December 2nd, 2025, Sentencing Day. The courtroom was quiet when Jimmie Lee Sr. stood up to speak, a pastor from Jackson who had raised his son with love and faith and the kind of unconditional support that's supposed to protect people from the world's worst impulses. He looked at Sheldon, looked at the judge, looked at everyone in that room, and said something no parent should ever have to say. I had to witness my son's skeletal remains. I touched his skull. No father should have to go through that. Jay trusted you. He wasn't just talking to Sheldon anymore. He was talking to everyone who had ever made Jay feel unsafe. Everyone who had stayed quiet when they should have spoken up. Everyone who had let fear or discomfort or indifference keep them from doing what was right. Judge Kelly Luther sentenced Sheldon to 50 years with 10 suspended, meaning 40 years to serve in prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. And before he handed down the sentence, he said something that stuck with me. Jay lived a lifestyle that was different from most people in Mississippi, and Mississippi got it right this time. It was an acknowledgement maybe that cases like this don't always end with justice, that people like Jay are often dismissed or ignored or treated like they matter less because of who they love. But Jay's father isn't finished. He's now pushing for something called the Jay Lee Bill, a piece of legislation that would require phone companies and social media platforms to provide access to the accounts of missing people under the age of 21, giving parents and law enforcement the tools they need to find someone before it's too late. Because if that law had existed in 2022, if investigators had been able to access Jay's messages and Sheldon's deleted Snapchats and all the digital breadcrumbs that took months to uncover, maybe Jay would still be alive.
A former Ole Miss student pleads guilty today to killing a classmate. The change in plea came as jury selection was beginning in Timothy Harrington's second trial for the murder of Jimmie J. Lee. Fox 13's investigative reporter Kayla Solomon joins us live in Oxford tonight. Kayla, Harrington pleads guilty to second-degree murder and tampering with evidence.
Yeah, Darcy, this comes more than 3 years after Jimmie J. Lee was seen on video leaving his off-campus apartment, never to be seen alive again. And it also comes exactly almost a year to the day to when Timothy Harrington's first trial started and ended in a hung jury. Since then, Lee's body was found in the woods in Carroll County, Mississippi. It's about 20 miles outside of Grenada, where Harrington's family lived. State prosecutors in the first trial said the motive was covering up a sexual relationship between Lee, an openly gay man, and Harrington, who was not openly gay. Since Lee's disappearance in 2022, students at Ole Miss and across Mississippi started an Instagram page called Justice for J. Lee, giving updates on the case. Fox 13 spoke to one member of the group who described what she wants to see when Harrington is sentenced.
We need 40, 50, 60 years to life. That's justice. Again, no amount of money, we can't bring them back. We were very honored to that God allowed us to have a body for the funeral. So that was some closure for sure. But justice is really putting a demand on fairness and equality for all people, regardless of sexuality or gender or expression.
Oxford Police Chief Jeff McCutcheon said Jay's legacy would be defined not by violence, but by love. And I hope that's true. But I also hope it's defined by change, by laws that protect people who can't protect themselves, by a world where someone like Jay doesn't have to be afraid of someone like Sheldon. So ask yourself this. If you saw the warning signs in someone's life, someone you cared about, or someone you barely knew, would you speak up, or would you tell yourself it's not your place and hope someone else does it instead? What's the one red flag you ignored that you wish you hadn't? The moment you saw something wrong and didn't act on it and later realized you should have? Drop it below, because maybe your story could help someone else recognize the signs before it's too late. If this video mattered to you, if Jay's story mattered to you, then subscribe, because people like him don't get second chances, but you do. You get to choose whether stories like this keep being told or whether they disappear into the algorithm and get forgotten. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And if you're still not subscribed, go to the comments and tell me why, because I'm reading every single one, and I genuinely want to know what's holding you back. Our hearts ache for Maria J's family. Words feel inadequate, but please know you are held in deepest sympathy and prayers. May you find strength and comfort in the memories of Jay. To everyone who made it to the end, thank you for watching, for your attention, and for joining us on this journey of reflection. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and above all, stay safe. See you on our next video.